In this tutorial, I'm going to teach you how to make a fondant rose the lazy Shakar bakery way. It's lazy because I don't follow the traditional method of inserting a floral wire through every individual petal. This does have its advantage because if you have individual wired petals, you could open and close them to suit your needs. But if you are pressed on time or you are an impatient person like myself, you will do it my way. In this rose that I'm holding, I actually do have a floral wire here because it makes it easier to insert in some cakes. Now what you want to do is make sure you wrap this wire with floral tape before you insert it into any cake. So let's begin. So to start, if you want to insert a floral wire, what you do is you roll a cone shape out of your fondant and you insert the floral wire. What I did is I dipped the floral wire in my glue, which is just water mixed with a little bit of Petals powder, and that is very handy whenever you are working with fondant. It's a great glue. So it's good to have a floral wire because some of the parts of the rose you need to have the rose hanging upside down. So let's begin. Well, to make the cone, it's very simple. You just break off a little piece of your fondant, just roll it in your hands, and then you just make a cone. Okay, so my petal cutters, I use a Wilton set, which is this monster set here. Honestly, this is probably the best $30 I've spent because I improvise with all of these petal cutters to make really beautiful flowers. I don't follow their rules here. I just, invent. Kind of like the lily cutter, which is what we're going to be using for the rose. So to make the first petal though, what we're going to do is roll out some fondant. This is cornstarch. If you've seen my previous videos, you'd know I prefer cornstarch over powdered sugar. Okay, so for the first petal, we want to roll this out really thin. Some people use the pasta machine to roll this, which is great. Now I'm going to grab the small rose cutter from the Wilton set, and I'm going to cut out a single little petal. So, right there. Now the beauty about nature is that it's very imperfect. When it comes to flowers, I actually don't like perfection in my work because the imperfections mimic nature more accurately. So if you have some rips here and there, really, don't stress about it. Okay, so now we rolled out our single petal. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stretch this out just a little bit. Extend it out. Okay, so I made it a little coney, if you could see. Now I'm going to grab some of my glue. And I put some on the sides. We're going to grab this one. Actually, let's go with my cheating method. No floral wire. And what we're going to do is just... Okay, so what I did is I curled the center. Because a rose, the first petal of the rose is still trying to open and bloom. So we want to mimic the closed. And don't worry about it being perfect because nature is not perfect. It is just beautiful. Okay, so now we're going to set this aside and we're going to start with the inner petals. So for the inner petals, I am going to use the traditional rose. I'm going to go ahead and dip my fondant in a little bit of Petals. So what this does, it makes it mimic gum paste and it dries faster. If you're going to work with strictly fondant, you have to make your roses at least 3 to 4 days ahead of time to give it a chance to really dry. But if you're like me, I will mix some Petals powder in my fondant and I actually make my roses a day or two ahead and I let it dry in the shape that I want it to take on my cake. Okay. So I don't roll the inner petals too thin because we're cheating, remember? So I don't want to have to wire each petal, let it dry overnight, then assemble. So I'm going to roll these just a little thicker. And you're going to cut out your design with the cutter. Now for these, they're the inner petals, right? So they haven't quite yet opened and bloomed. So we don't want to give them too much of a ruffled edge, but we want to give it just a hint. So this is my cell pad. It's my best friend. And this is the ball tool. So what you do, the ball tool works best if you keep it along the edge of your petal. If you go in the center, you're going to start warping this. But if you go to the very edge and you push down on the pad versus the petal, then you start getting your beautiful little ruffled design. So if you could compare, this is the non-ruffled, this is the ruffled. So we're just giving this a very slight ruffle, just for texture. If you want to keep it modern, you could do it the way we did the inner petal. But I love ruffles. Alright, so I ruffled all of them, and now what I'm going to do, I'm going to place it down here. I'm going to get some of my glue, I'm going to put some in the center, then I'm going to put some along the edge. Don't put too much glue because then it becomes really slippery and it's harder to manage and to let it dry. So then you plop this down in the center. And you start applying your petals. Actually, I forgot to glue this one here. So make sure you glue both sides of your petals and just start applying them. You overlap them slightly. It's really easy when you're using a rose cutter because the design is already made for you. So here you have the center. Now I'm going to start pushing this in a little bit more because I like my roses to be a little bit more compact. But again, you do this to your taste. Now I'm much happier. So now we have a good first layer. So this part is completely up to you how many inner layers you want to add. It depends on how big you're going for the rose. So I'm just going to add a couple more. And I'm going to speed through this so you don't get bored. For the second layer though, I'm going to ruffle the petals a little bit more so that it seems like the rose is starting to bloom. So to ruffle it, you add just a little bit more pressure, and you have to make sure you do the back and forth motion. Remember, you're pushing down on the edge of the petal to the pad. This does take a lot of practice, so don't feel bad if you just can't ruffle properly. It does take. The nice thing about art, you can interpret it however you want. Okay, so you can see that this is a lot wider because I ruffled it more. See? Pretty ruffles. So now we're going to do the same thing we did before. Put some on the sides. Now we're going to grab this, put it in the center, and start applying our petals. Now make sure that you are pushing the sides down well so that they're nicely glued. I'm going to actually go ahead and start adding my bigger layers. Now, the outer petals are in bloom. So these are the most delicate part of the rose, and these are the ones that you want to roll out thin. This is when it comes in handy to hang the rose upside down if you have the wire. But if you don't, do not worry. I, most of the time, never ever hang them upside down. I just do my cheater's method. Now I'm going to I'm going to cut out some of my petals. So I love this cutter for the outer petals. The heart shape is great because now it mimics 2 petals instead of 1 and it saves me time. So I'm going to cut out a few. And now these we really want to ruffle. So get creative with your petal cutters. You could use them for a lot of things. Okay, so this one I'm going to ruffle a lot. And the more you ruffle it, the more delicate it's going to get. And I love it when I have some cuts in it because, again, it's really going to mimic nature because no petal is perfect. Here's one. I'm just going to ruffle all of them right now. So now all of these are ruffled. So what do? Same thing we've been doing. We're going to add some glue to the edges and to the middle. Just a little bit higher. Now remember, this is the outer rose. The outer petal of the rose. So we want to be very careful where we apply it. See how flimsy it is because we rolled it out thin? Don't worry. When I look at this rose, to me, I would like to see one more petal here to make it look more full. So I'm going to make one more. Meantime, I'm going to seed it in my little drying cup. Okay, so here we'll have a small rose. If you want to make it bigger, you just keep adding your outer petals. I added quite a few in my rose. And it depends, if you want the petals bigger, just cut them out, stretch them out with your roller before you apply it. So now, see how flimsy these are? And I'll use tissue paper to separate the tiers and let them dry overnight the way I want them to. So I just insert it. Paper towel works well, but the problem with that is it sometimes gets stuck in the edible glue and it's a pain to get rid of and remove. And the nice part of tissue paper, it's colored, so you won't make the mistake of leaving it. So now I'm going to start adjusting my inner petals to give them a little bit more life. See, this one I would want it a little bit higher, so I'm going to put some tissue paper underneath it to prop it. Right there. Okay, so now it's been a few hours, and I went ahead and removed all of the tissue paper, and we have our rose. You could keep it like this, or if you want, you could add some petal dust. If you want this to shimmer and not be dull, then you would use luster dust. A little goes a long way with this. So you could just either do the edges. If you want just like a hint of pink, make sure you're rubbing it in properly. Or if you want to color your entire rose, then you cover the entire petal. And there you have it. Now we have a pink rose. So you could do whatever you want with this. You want to add shadows to it, go ahead. Got a darker pink, lighter pink. Smoke the edges if you want. Like this. So let's say you want to add some super dark accents so that it could really stand out. Now you could add some darkness to the edges of your petals. And you can see how this is starting to change your flower. So you can see how getting the petals, the edges, changes your flower. So you know, there you have it. Make your rose to your taste. In case you're curious, I use red terracotta for these edges. If you have any questions, please ask below or email me at shakarbakery@gmail.com and I'd be happy to answer any questions or comments you may have. Thank you for watching this tutorial and I look forward to making more for you.